Hi, in this episode I'm going to be showing you how I designed the MC12, the Maserati MC12. Very important in the modern history of Maserati because it was their return to motor racing. Many people mistake the MC12 as being just a copy of the Enzo. That's not the case. There are quite a few modifications to it, dynamically and obviously aesthetically, to make it interpreted as a different car. I want to go through briefly the process of how the design evolved and became so successful. So the starting point, like I said, was a Ferrari Enzo. Maserati not having really a defined look for its race cars. It was a little bit of imagination left to my creativity to come up with what would look like a Maserati if it was a race car. So the car immediately took on quite a long, dramatic silhouette, as you can see here. The back end was extremely long, not because we wanted it to be long, but because it's effective when you're trying to control the airflow over the rear of the car. So we had a pretty dramatic static spoiler on the rear end, quite high. It really gave the car quite a bit of presence. If anybody remembers the Dodge Charger, Super Beats, and Stock Car Racing, a lot of their presence came from having a massive wing in the back. Different reasons, obviously, but ours was basically so we could control the air on the top flowing over and also the air underneath the car coming from underneath. So we needed to produce a bit of downforce from there. So I was locked in a little bit to what the existing greenhouse and glass area of the Enzo had. So that was the only compromise that really upset me a little bit because I could have changed it and made it even a little bit more dramatic. But as you can see, already with these simple shapes, the presence of the car started to increase. So I put quite a bit of sweeping shoulder lines through the vehicle. You'll see as I do this. That kind of drew your eye along the sides in such a way that it wasn't boring. I mean, your eyes were moving along curving lines the whole way. That was pretty much the car from a side view. As you can see, it's long and drawn out, but that for a designer is not a bad thing. It gives them room to play with and room to massage the surfaces of the car in the way that it does flow much nicer than when you have, say, small cars to work with. When we're designing cars, obviously there's quite a bit of difference between designing a race car and a road car. And if I show you a few lines here, it'll probably give you an idea and understanding of what is critical in a car that actually has to perform hours on end at very high speeds. And this car, at the time, obviously, it wasn't called the MC12. It was just a project, but it would become the car that Maserati would enter into this World Championship Series. Now, in that series, you have to understand that a lot of cars, a lot of manufacturers are coming from road cars, converted to becoming race cars, and then they would compete in this series. Maserati's approach was a little bit interesting, I would say, because they came through the back door in the sense that what they would do, instead of modifying an existing road car, they would take and modify a race car that they designed that would be designed to become a road car. Because in this series, you have to have a minimum of 25 versions of that race car homologated for road use. So the approach then was, let's design a race car and modify it in such a way that we can make at least 25 road cars for it. So of course, when you design a race car, you want it to be beautiful, but at the same time, if you design it to be effective and to work well, it's almost a natural consequence that the car will itself start to look beautiful anyways because it works. These drawings are a little bit deceiving at the beginning because you never really feel until you start to put in more lines if the car is what you want it to be or not. Main thing is just stick with it, and eventually the car will start to appear in front of you and in a way and fashion that does make sense to you. The long rear end is basically a trait that a lot of race cars try to achieve because that surface in the back works to keep the car, again, glued to the ground. One of the distinctive elements that I did do on the car that really gave it quite a bit of personality was on the actual front of the car, when the air comes into the what we call the low temperature radiators located in the front of the bumper, that air has to exit pretty quickly. That's a lot of hot air that we don't want re-entering the car. So you have to extract that air in some kind of vent area. So the Maserati MC12 has some highly distinctive air extractors, which I loved, and it seems that it's gotten quite a few people liking it too. So what I was able to do was integrate some strakes that you'll see here, long thin strakes, which in a normal car production probably wouldn't be allowed because they're very delicate and very hard to develop individually by hand. But obviously this is a high performance luxury race car and sports car, so all this was able to be done by hand. They give it quite a bit of character, and if I show you how they work with the rest of the design, you'll start to see how it makes sense. So what I did on the top was run this design up and over onto the top of the fenders, as you can see here, and then followed the upper inner part of the fender line, which is through here, and created this shape here. And then this area here was dedicated to extract the air from the wheel wells. And so they became related design-wise to the overall graphic here. Subconsciously, you look at it, you like it, it makes sense, but you don't realize that it's a trick on the eye. It's the two shapes are working simultaneously together to give you this one look. I'm very proud of how that turned out. Because the engine essentially is a mid-mounted engine in this area, that engine is producing an incredible amount of heat that has to be evacuated. So you take it out. A lot of it comes out through the back end, obviously, through here, vents and things. A mistake that a lot of young designers will do is they'll not consider these things till the very end, and then it's too late, or you have to modify your design quite a bit to achieve something that's feasible. So as you see, the drawing is evolving to become something a little bit more recognizable as I'm going along. That's why you should never lose hope in a sketch. It's very rare that I'll start a sketch and stop and start all over again, because you can basically fix anything. Using a ballpoint pen, that gives it the real sketchy look, which I always love. I hate tight sketches that look like you've only used one line. There's not a lot of thinking in one line. Main thing always is just to get your proportions and your perspective pretty accurate. You can see that everything in the way I'm drawing here is going to a theoretical calming vanishing point. So that's why everything sort of goes in this direction. That's something at the beginning you try to do conscientiously, and as you get better and better at sketching, it's just a natural thing to respect the laws of perspective, and your cars start evolving much more quickly and accurately when you absorb that technique. So again, I find it very hard to draw that line here that I mentioned earlier. If I'd have had my way, we'd have modified this area here and allowed that line to flow. Obviously, when it works well, it looks great. I think that's part of the reason why this car is considered to be fairly attractive, is because it works so well. And it's always been, like I said, my philosophy that if something works well, it looks great. So it's hard to design something that works well and doesn't look great. That is just not a natural combination in the universe. Things that work well look fantastic. Things that don't work well don't look very good to begin with. So if you want to design something to look great, make sure it works great. And so that's a little bit about how I designed the MC12 and the process I engaged when I did it. So one of the funnest projects I've ever done in my life.